Thanks so much. Welcome to the December vRealize webinar. Today, as you saw in your invitation, we're going to be covering how to build out cost transparency into your cloud. For those that don't know me, my name is Shelly. I'm the cloud management engineer that supports your account and supports other kind of medium to large size businesses in the Southeast. My better half and partner in crime is Tim Adams, who I know many of you guys have talked to as well previously. And today we actually have a special guest with us to help us really deep dive and get under the hood in this topic. And that is Brandon Gordon. You want to say hello, Brandon?
Good morning, everybody. Happy to be here.
Good morning indeed. He is the wizard behind the curtain at VMware that really specializes in cost transparency and vROps and the features that we're going to be talking through. And that's another point to emphasize as we get started. Sometimes you hear that Tim and I are the specialists that cover cloud management, but we have even a bigger fleet of specialty components from the business that can come in and support us with specific use cases like cost management that we're going to be talking about today. So jumping forward, as I always do, I like to kick things off with a poll. So I went ahead and launched our first poll, and that should have just showed up in your screen. I really wanted to ask you guys what is most important for you when it comes to understanding cost transparency. Are you looking at things for more of the overall cost, or do you need to justify, capacity reclamation and plan better for future capacity? Do you need to show back to users the cost of running their workloads, or do you need to better summarize for leadership the ROI and TCO of the IT environment? So that was what my first poll is about. So everyone, go ahead and take a second to answer that. I see a few answers coming in. Brandon, just so you know, it looks like we have a little bit of a lead in the summarizing ROI and TCO for leadership, which I know is a topic that you really focus on.
Awesome.
A few people voted for understanding capacity and better planning for future capacity. And then a few people voted for just being able to better assess the overall cost of running your environment. Not too many answers for showing back to users. So maybe we'll just glaze over that topic today. Also made everyone pick just one answer. So they had to prioritize the one that was most important. So Showback still might be relevant, but not the most relevant.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Awesome. Well, as we go ahead and get started, I will stop sharing my screen and allow Brandon to fire up with us. The first thing I wanted to dive into, Brandon, kind of looking at the poll as well, is how is vROps built out to properly evaluate the cost of running your private cloud? How does that work on the back end?
Sure. So by default, when you set up vRealize operations, all you really need to do to get cost working is to set a currency. So you just pick what currency you want it to run in, and then the system will automatically start calculating costs. So those costs are based on what we call the cost reference database. So these are basically default costs that that VMware researchers have come up with. So you can think of them like MSRP of the server back, when it was first released, or standard labor rates or maintenance rates, and et cetera. So like I said, by default, you don't have to do anything other than set a currency, and it'll start calculating cost. But if you want to go in and make those costs more relevant to what you actually spent, what you paid for servers, what you pay for storage, your actual expenses, then you can come here into cost settings, and this will actually allow you to customize those. So I'll show you a few of these. There's a lot in here to kind of go through, but like here's the server hardware traditional. So this was where you can enter what you paid for, basically non-HCI servers, so your standard servers. So you can go in here and pick a server. It's like, let's pick these 3 servers, and I can pick a date when I purchased them. And then I can select whether I own the server or lease the server, and then how much I paid for that server. So you can go, this basically gets you the ability to go here and assign those costs. You also have this kind of yellow bar down here. This is where you can set the default cost. So for all servers of this particular make and model and hardware configuration, it will automatically get this cost. So if you don't want to go through and customize every single server that you purchased, you can go in here and just enter basically the cost of your standard cost of a server, make and model, and then it will just use that cost. So you don't have to go and do all the minutia if you don't want to. That's where this default cost can come into play as well. Just also to mention this own versus lease, the system will do, if you own the server, it will do depreciation for you. So you can go up here and set your depreciation settings. So the default is 5 years and depreciation using straight line, but you also have an option of max or double or straight. I don't know if I should get into all of these, but we have hyperconverged servers here. So this is where you can configure your vSAN hosts, how much you pay for those. The key difference here is you have this compute percentage. So this is where you tell the system how much of the server is compute and then how much of the cost is for storage. And the system uses that to calculate the cost of your vSAN data stores. It's basically based on this your purchase price and then your compute percentage. And that's how it figures out how much your vSAN data stores cost. So it's got all the math and logic in there. Storage is another important one. So with storage, you can actually go in and configure, find the right data center. So you can assign tags to data stores and give different costs to the data stores based on those tags. So you could do things like specific storage arrays, or if you have storage tiers, there's a lot of flexibility in creating these tags, and you just assign your cost based on those tags. So you don't have to have a single cost for all of your storage, but so that's pretty important to know when you're doing the cost of storage. I won't go into details on all the other ones here, but you have license. This is where you can assign your license costs, your applications, maintenance, labor, network, facilities, and then additional cost. This one's kind of important. This is where you can add cost for, just like, if none of those categories apply, you can add cost based on clusters, data centers, hosts, vCenters, or VMs. So the VM one's kind of nice because you can go in here and actually assign it by tag. So you can say, virtual machines that have the antivirus tag of yes will automatically get a cost of, say $20 a month, and now automatically get that cost added to the virtual machines based on the tags. So like I said, there's a lot of stuff you can go in here and configure. So it's worth looking at them to see what makes sense for your environment. And like I was saying, you can kind of set the defaults if you don't want to go through and set every little thing, and just make it a bit more accurate than just relying on a reference cost. Hopefully that's not too in depth, too quick.
No, perfect. And something I always think about, like when I talk about cost transparency, is how much flexibility you have. And you brought this up, right? That as soon as you put in that your currency is dollars, right? vROps will try to make an estimate based upon what hardware you're running and what you're running about what your environment costs to run, right? But you can get down, as you were showing, with licenses and other costs to really get down on a per VM level, exactly what certain groups or certain projects are costing the business.
Exactly. And you can see here the reference cost. So all of the cost drivers actually list what the reference cost is. So you can do kind of a comparison based on what we have as reference cost and what you enter in the cost drivers. So even if you go and change it, you can still know what the original was.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. And I know it also shows in the main screen what percentage you're off from reference cost, right? So so you can take that back to your hardware vendor against the vROps database if you're feeling a little bit sassy, but that's up to you.
And you have to be you also have to be aware of some of the differences. I know it trips up a few customers when you look at license costs. So license cost by default is only showing vSphere. So if you enter other license costs, like if you buy the suite and enter license based on the suite, the comparison to the industry benchmark will be off, but that's because you're including additional licenses. So you also have to be cognizant of what the reference cost is pointing to one thing, and if you enter something that's slightly different, don't freak out if it shows you're higher.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's interesting. That's a good point to call out. So looking at the poll and what people voted for, we had a lot of people vote for how they could better understand costs when it comes to justify reclaiming capacity or planning better for future capacity. Could you go into that for a few minutes, Brandon?
Certainly. So let me first show you this data center cost drivers and kind of set the stage a bit. So I'm going to pick on this data center here. I think should have some good stuff. So what I've done here is I've selected a data center so I can see the cost of my data center itself broken out by all the cost drivers that I was just showing, and then my storage network costs. And the important part here is I can see like the cost of my clusters in the environment, the cost of my storage, and then what I paid for my servers. So this gives you kind of the visibility of the cost of your infrastructure, basically at a data center level. But then when you want to go and look at what can I save, how can I optimize my cost, that's where you switch over into this reclaim feature. So go to the home page here and go to reclaim. And what this does now is I can go in and select the data center. Let's pick this production one. And now this is looking at the same data center I was showing. And now this is saying I can potentially save $14 a month if I do this reclamation, which seems very low. Interesting. Something looks off here. I don't know what's going on. Let me try that other data center I just picked.
Yeah, all the savings looks like it's coming from Orphan Disk for that $14 a month.
There we go.
Yeah.
So this data center is better. So we've got $1,000 a month that I can save through reclamation. So there's 33 virtual machines that have been identified and 62 orphan disks. Here's my total amount of capacity that I can reclaim if I go through and do everything. And so I go down here on the bottom, I can start digging into the details here. So let's find, here's a virtual machine, this SC2RC1. I can save $116 a month. This is a powered off virtual machine. I forgot to mention that. So this virtual machine has, looks like over half a terabyte of disk space, and it's been powered off for 180 days. Maybe that's not that important. I can save a half a terabyte of disk space. I mean, why do I have this virtual machine consuming this much disk space and been powered off for that long? It's worth investigating. And if I go and decide, yes, this VM should be deleted, I can click here, delete VMs, and actually go through and kick off the deletion process. So this will go into vCenter and delete the virtual machine for me. And I can also exclude the virtual machine. So if I want to keep this one, maybe it's okay. I hit exclude, and now you'll see it is gone from the list. But I can always go back down here and show excluded virtual machines and add it back. So the system will start monitoring that one again. So that's the way you can kind of manage these. And then looking at these others, I can go in. So this is showing idle VMs. So idle virtual machine is a VM that hasn't consumed more than 100 megahertz of CPU by default in the last 7 days. So you can see here, this first virtual machine, I can save $29 a month. It's got 2 CPUs. It's using a little, almost 8 gigabytes of memory and a little over 32 gigabytes of disk space, and it's been idle for 389 days. So from the system's perspective, it doesn't look like this virtual machine is really doing much at all. So I can go in and either delete it or power it off. So pretty straightforward. And then snapshots. So these are finding virtual machines that have snapshots by default older than 7 days. So we can find this first one here. We've got $95 a month I can save. Looks like the snapshot on this virtual machine is 474 gigabytes. That's a really big snapshot, and it's 139 days old. So that's kind of a scary one for me to see. But we have that snapshot out there that's quite old and very large. And then the last one here is orphan disks. So we can go in here and say these are disks that are on the data store, but they're not attached to a virtual machine. So essentially, they look like they're useless. So like here's a VMDK, costs $25 a month using 122 gigabytes of disk space, and it has not been touched for 860 days. So it looks like that VMDK probably is not needed. But it's worth going and doing the research and figuring out is it really needed or not. But we have some settings up here that you can set. So this is these are the defaults. So powered off VMs have to be powered off for 7 days. Idle VMs have to be idle for 7 days. Snapshots be at least 7 days old. And then orphan disks are 30 days. So you can go in here and adjust these. And then if you ever forget what these mean, you have the little tooltip here that explains. I know the idle VM is the one that we get a lot of questions about. So always look at the tooltips there. We had them add that to make it easier to remember. So once you go through and do all this reclamation, you can see there's a lot of savings that we can get just by deleting and cleaning up these virtual machines. So it looks like the majority of what I was showing here is disk space, but there is also some CPU and memory that we can save from the idle virtual machines as well. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, that was awesome, Brandon. Just for everyone that's on the line too, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'm looking at them and I can relay them back to Brandon. The next thing I kind of want to run through looking at the poll is if we could do kind of a quick take at the Showback dashboard and then jump into maybe how vROps could better help, leadership and management understand the ROI and TCO of the IT environment. And maybe even show how you could share that out to them.
So by default, the system has this dashboard for my VMs here. We have this dashboard called Showback. Of course, that's not interesting either. There we go. That one's better. So we have this dashboard called Showback. So like I've mostly been showing you, like the infrastructure related costs. I showed you a little bit about the cost for reclamation. This lets you actually show the cost per group of virtual machines. So this can be applications. This can be a custom group that you create that represents, a business unit or a team. There's a lot of flexibility in how you can define these groups. But once you actually have these groups defined, then you can go to this dashboard and you just select your group, and then you can see the cost. So we have the month-to-date cost of the VMs here, projected cost this month, and the potential savings for, if I do reclamation, all the reclamation recommendations. So I can see the ranked virtual machines here. So the most expensive ones are on top, and then the ones with the most savings potential from a cost perspective, and then the details of the cost of the individual virtual machines. And the idea is you can use this dashboard to show the cost of the virtual machines to your end users. And the idea is it can help influence their behavior, maybe let them, let go of some virtual machines, or basically to be a little bit better consumers of the company's resources. And cost transparency is really good at helping to influence your end users' behavior. So that's kind of high level on the Showback piece. I mean, I can get more in details, but I don't know if you want to go more in depth on that.
Yeah, since too many people didn't vote for it, let's jump straight into the return on investment and some of the TCO stuff vROps can show.
Yeah, so this one I created, I don't know, it's been several months now. So this was based on some customer feedback where, we have all this cost stuff shown throughout the system, but we didn't have a great way of showing, basically everything that vRealize operations can do for you. So I created this dashboard to actually consolidate all of the cost information together. So I've showed things here like the total cost of ownership for the entire environment. I have my potential savings here. So these are basically the reclamation stuff that I showed, plus a few other things. And the potential cost increase. So this includes like fixing undersized virtual machines, the amount of, how much it would cost to fix undersized virtual machines. And then this is the total number. So if you were to do all of the recommendations, this is what basically your new TCO would be. And then I convert that to a percentage. So basically from a cost perspective, we can optimize our environment almost 6%. So we can reduce our cost by about 6%. If we go with all the recommendations from vRealize operations. So that's kind of the message we're trying to show is, if you go and do everything, you can become that much more efficient in your environment. So from here, I have a lot of details that kind of back these recommendations. So we have things here like broken down by the cost savings. So here's all the idle virtual machines, powered off VMs, VM snapshots, orphan disks. So those ones I just showed you. oversized VMs. So this is something that I've added. I've got a custom dashboard that you can use to calculate those costs. Reclaimable hosts. So this is basically looking at clusters that have basically more hosts than they need to run their projected workload. So this is hosts that you can potentially take out of a cluster to reuse somewhere else. So that way you don't have to buy additional hardware for other clusters. And then undersized virtual machines. This is that cost of fixing undersized virtual machines. And then I kind of graph the two numbers together so you can see how they relate to each other. And the idea over time, if you're actively optimizing your environment, you should see the gap between your your potential savings and your TCO kind of shrink. So that's the high level stuff. And then I have a lot more info down here that kind of gets into the details, like breaking up the cost transparency from there. Things like I've got here, I'm showing the cost of deleted virtual machines. So if you delete virtual machines, we kind of track the cost of those, so you can kind of see how much you're freeing up by all these deletions and these removals of virtual machines. I've got a section here showing the average cost of virtual machines, so you can see from like a cost efficiency perspective. Ideally, your virtual machine should become cheaper over the long term. And this will help you show that basically you're becoming more and more efficient, so your VMs become cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. We have the TCO breakdown, so this helps you figure out where your costs are going. Typically, in most customers that I've talked to, storage is one of the top, and then the hardware is usually up there as a close second. But the idea is here, we can look at it from the cost drivers perspective that I showed earlier and see how those break down across the entire environment to see where most of your money is going. We can also see here from our capacity perspective, so the cost of the capacity that we have used and then the cost of the capacity that we have left. This is the what we have room to grow into. So you can see here, I've got also a projection. I can fit 2,842 more virtual machines in my remaining capacity. So while there is a cost for the capacity that I have remaining, I know how much I can fit in there, and that that helps me understand from a cost perspective, basically how we're doing. Cost per data center. This will help you identify maybe some data centers that are more expensive than others. I've had a few customers that didn't realize certain data centers were so expensive compared to others. So this was kind of enlightening to some of them. But I think majority of the customers, this is kind of stating the obvious. You usually have a few data centers that are your primary data centers, and those will be the more expensive ones. So, but the idea is this gives you that more visibility. This one tracks your server depreciation. It's like identifies like if you have servers that are fully depreciated, that's not necessarily a good thing. That just means the servers are very old, more likely to break. Maintenance is higher, more labor to basically keep them running. So it's something you kind of want to avoid. And then this is another view of the potential saving. So this helps you dive in to figure out how you're doing from a savings and optimization perspective, and you can see how this kind of fluctuates over time. Hopefully, these will trend down, over the longer term as you're actively fixing things. And then the last thing here is for the undersized virtual machine. So these are basically, fixing VMs that are undersized and helping them to perform better. And ideally, these should trend down as well as you address these virtual machines that are suffering. So I know there's a lot on here. I do have I can share the link to this. So this is a custom dashboard. Let me put the link here.
So this is a custom dashboard, but you can go out to the Solutions Exchange, download it, and upload it and set it up in your environment. So it doesn't come as a default dashboard, but it's pretty straightforward to install and get set up.
Yeah, definitely. So if you look at the link I just put in the chat, so that's the blog post where I wrote about it. And you can, there's links to the dashboard to install it. So definitely encourage you to, those of you that are looking at the ROI TCO piece, I think this is a really great tool to help.
Awesome. And then in turn, Brandon, you could, take this dashboard, right, maybe limit it down so it's just showing, a few things, and then share it out with users using shareable dashboards, right?
Yeah, exactly. So you can click on the little share icon up here. So the typical consumer of this would be like management or upper management, where they don't necessarily need to log into vRealize operations. So you can kind of tailor this dashboard to only the info that they want to see or they need to see, and then you just share this URL. So they don't even need to have a username or password to log in. They just go to this URL, and there's the dashboard with all the data that they want to see. So this is the way I would encourage sharing it, especially like when you're trying to show to management. It's just a lot simpler, and I do have descriptions. So if you notice here, I did put basically detailed description of all the all the information that is being displayed on the right. So as people are looking at it, they can just read there, and it tells them what they're seeing. I try to make it easy for basically for anybody to be able to consume this dashboard.
Yeah, awesome, Brandon. Definitely has been a fast and furious session. We covered a lot, and I even learned something new. I didn't know you could when you're reclaiming. I didn't know you could change the amount of days it waited. So that was a cool new thing for me to learn. For everyone on the phone, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. I'm also going to launch our new poll just so you have time to be able to answer it. You can vote on the topic that we're going to cover during our January webinar, so definitely look at that. While we kind of finish up and wait to see if any questions roll through, Brandon, I know you work with a lot of customers to help get this rolled out and help build out the roadmap. What would be some quick tips that you would have for a customer that's trying to roll this model out in their business?
I would say make sure you know how you want to show the costs. Decide whether you want to go and customize the cost drivers. It probably is worth the effort if you're going to be showing it to like finance teams or even upper management. It might be worth the extra effort in customizing the cost drivers. But you just need to understand what you're actually going to be using it for. You may not have to go through all the effort in configuring them. So I know some customers, it can be daunting to kind of go through that, but I'd say just you don't need to necessarily. Just make sure you understand, how accurate the data needs to be, and then kind of proceed from there. The idea is this can show you how efficient you are from a cost perspective, and that's what the key message here is understanding how you're doing from a cost efficiency perspective.
Right. There's definitely a lot of stuff and a lot of granularity you can get into. So, and I know you kind of work more with the strategy of this feature set, Brandon. What additional developments do you see on the roadmap when it comes to IT, cost transparency, and vROps?
They're continuing to improve the cost drivers, so adding more capabilities, more features, making it more flexible in doing those. I know there's a lot of customers that have expressed interest in the cost of Kubernetes. So we do actually calculate the cost of the native vSphere with Tanzu. So we have the vSphere Tanzu pods and namespaces actually have costs on them today. So I did share a dashboard on Sample Exchange that you can use to show that. We don't support the cost of Kubernetes. Basically other flavors of Kubernetes showing the cost, but we do have the cost of the virtual machines themselves. So you could use Supermetrics or such to show those costs if that's something that you need now. But that is something the team is looking at.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I know Kubernetes was one of our topics for next month, but it looks like we're either doing custom dashboarding 101 or network visibility with vROps and vRNI. They are tied. So if anyone wants to get into their last minute vote between those two, make sure to put it in. Well, thank you so much, Brandon. I also, for everyone on the line, I dropped a link to sign up for my newsletter in the chat. So feel free to sign up for that to get the latest vROps updates, webinar announcements. But I really appreciate your time, Brandon. I'll hang out for a second in case anyone has any more questions. But thanks again for all the attendees, and thank you for our special guest, Brandon, for getting on and running us through that.